Welcome. I'm going to show you the way that I've learned now to identify chords. This is a chord extension chart style that I'm going to teach. Everybody has unique ways of learning theory. This is how I'm learning theory. Thank God for a concept that works well with me. So I'm going to share the concept with you, and hopefully it'll be useful to someone. Rather than trying to remember theory, what I remember is numbers. The piano is made up of 13 keys. Starting from your middle C, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 keys. If you take the flats out, you have 8 keys, which makes it an octave. And in an octave, you have a total of 8 major chords. And from those 8 major chords, you make up minors, sus4, flat 5, major 7, and so forth. So in order to find your C, if you're looking to identify it, if you're a novice just learning how to play, in order to identify where your middle C is, always remember this black keys, the 2 black keys. And the first black key, half step down from that, is your C, middle C. And think of your alphabet. So if you're going down the piano, it's C, B, and A. A, B, C. If you're going down the piano, D, E, F, G. And that pattern repeats over again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that repeats itself over and over from bottom to top. And that's how I remember where my C and my D and E, F, G is. I take my middle C, and I know that if I go up this direction, it's like saying my alphabet backwards. And I know that it's A starts the alphabet and G ends the alphabet. So from middle C, it's B and A. And from middle C going down, it's D, E, F, G. So I know my A starts it and my G ends it. Now, in order to remember chord patterns through the numbering sequence, in an octave you have 8 keys. Every odd key makes a chord. No matter where you're playing it, every odd key makes a chord. So middle C is 1, 3, and 5. That makes a major chord. So if I was going to play it in E major, I take that same pattern, and here's E. So you do the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So you take that same pattern with the 8 keys, and if you went to E, you do the same thing. Do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. All right. So same pattern. You got 1, 3, and 5, and that makes a E major chord. No matter where you play it on the scale. That's the F major chord, G major chord, A major chord, B major chord, back to the root. And so from your C to your C, you have a C major, a D major, E major, F major, G major, A major, B major, and back to you. And then your flats are D flat, E flat, F sharp, A flat, B flat, and then you're back to your root. So if you was going to run it all the way with 13 keys, it's C major, D flat, D major, E flat, E major, F major, F sharp, G major, A flat, A major, B flat, B major, back to your root, C major. Now, another thing is with every major chord, or any chord, period, you can invert them. You have a first and second inversion. So this is a C major. I take the G and I move it to my, could be considered my 1. So 1, 3, 5, I take my 5 and reverse it. So my 5 now is over here, so that's my first inversion. If I take my 3 and move it to my 1, that becomes my second inversion of C. So now that's my second inversion of C. So this is the same pattern. That's the same C, just played in a different pattern, and it repeats itself over and over. Same thing if you're doing D. If you did D major, reverse it, right? You take your D on after you do your first. This is my first inversion, so I take my D, which would be and move it over. So if I move it over, see, I got a D major. That's my second inversion right there. So D major is my major root, first inversion, second inversion. And how did I teach you how to do that? You take your, for your first inversion, you take your 5 and move it to the 1. And on your second inversion, you take your 3 and you move it to the 1. And you do that throughout the scale. Now, you have a C major, which is 1, 3, and 5. To turn it into a minor, you take your 3 and you turn it into a flat. You move it a half step towards your root, which is this direction. No matter where you're playing it on the piano, 1 half step this direction turns it into a minor. So this is a C major. You take your 3 and you move it up a half step. That's a C minor chord. Now, if I'm in E flat, same pattern. If I'm in an E flat chord and I want to turn this into a minor, I take my 3 and move it a half step. That becomes a E flat minor chord. If I'm in my F major chord, I take my 3 and move it up a half step. That makes it a F minor chord, and so forth. If I'm in my B major, same pattern. If I'm in my B major chord, I take my 3 and move it down a half step, and that makes it a B minor chord. So no matter where you play it on the scale, you just move it the 3 a half step, which is a flat 3, and that makes it a minor chord. Now, if I want to turn it into a sus chord, a sus4 chord, you do the same number in sequence, but instead of playing 1, 3, and 5, you take your 3 and move it 1 half step over, which will bring you to your 4, and that makes it 1, 4, 5. That makes it your C sus 4 because it's the 4th key in that chord. So if I'm in a D flat and I want to make my D flat into a D flat sus4, I take my 3, move it a half step. That makes it a sus4. No matter where I play on it, if I'm in an E flat, same pattern. I want to make it a sus chord. I take my 3, move it up to a 4, and that makes it a E flat sus4 chord. Now, if I want to make it into a major 7 chord, easiest way to do is you think of the root, and the next key over is 7. So, 7, 8. Remember what we talked about? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have a C major, and the 7 key make it a C major 7 because it's a major chord with the 7th key in it. So that's a C major chord. If I'm here in D flat, easiest way to remember how to turn the D flat into a D flat 7 major 7 chord. Remember, you look at it, you look at the main root key or the first key and look down a half step from it, and that's how you can identify it. So that's a D major. If I'm in E major, look at my next step, half, half. Remember what I told you about half? Half, no matter where you're going to go a half step. And pretty much with theory or chords, everything pretty much moves in half steps when you're doing chord progressions. Changes, like from a major to a minor, from a minor to the only one that's like you're not using any half steps is when you do like a major 7. But all right, so you have an E major chord, turn it into a minor by going a half step. You take your first and you go a half step, and you know that this will be a E major 7 because it's a half step from your original key. If I have F major, I just look at it, the next key down from it, which is a E, and that's a F major 7. Now, if I wanted to turn this into an augmented or diminished chord, a diminished chord, you take your 3, you move it a half step, you take your 5, you move it a half step this direction, and it becomes an augmented chord. You keep your root the same. So C major, you take your 3 and your 5 and move them a half step this direction, and now you have a C diminished, I'm sorry. If you want to turn it into an augmented chord, you keep your 1, 3, and you take your 5 and you move it a half step forward, and that becomes a C augmented chord. Okay, now if you want to take your C major chord and turn it into a C minor 7 chord, you take your, remember that 3, go to a flat, and you take your 7 and you go to a flat in that direction, and that becomes a C minor 7. So as you can see, learning chords are not as difficult once you understand the pattern of the number sequence, and you take your numbers and turn them into, you move them a half step forward or back to turn them into the other types of progressions that we're talking about, like C minor, sus4, sus9, minor 6, flat 5s, and so forth. Okay, for example, like if you want to turn this into a flat 5, a C, C flat 5, what you would do is you would take the C, E, and G, which is 1, 3, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, this would be a, let's see what this is. This would be a C7, because you take your 7 and you move it up a half step, that makes it a C7. If you want this to just be a C5 would just be the C and the G, and you take out the 3. And that's all I have for you today, but I hope that helped you with the numbering pattern, so you can remember no matter where you are in the scale, you just think of the numbers 3, you go to a flat, that makes it a minor. So if I'm here, same thing. You know, thanks for watching. Hope what I've shared has helped.